I'm Caitlin Reed. I'm 34 years old, and I never imagined I'd be the one to put my family on trial until the moment I did. The scene is etched in my memory, 6 months ago, at our family Thanksgiving dinner. The air, thick with the smell of roast turkey and hypocrisy, shattered when my sister, Cassidy, slapped me across the face. Her voice was pure poison. "You have 10 minutes to get out of my house." Behind her, our parents laughed and clapped like they were watching a particularly satisfying reality TV show. My cheek stung a fierce, hot bloom of pain. But instead of crying, I smiled. A cold, deliberate smile. I reached into my bag, pulled out a simple manila folder, and slammed it onto the crowded table. The sound cut through their amusement like a knife. "Then you all have 5 minutes," I said. Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. Their smug, laughing faces drained of color as the meaning of my words and that folder crashed over them. In that instant, years of humiliation of being the family doormat, the unpaid repair woman, the silent swallower of every lie, exploded inside me. That folder held the deed to our Spanish ranch house, a secret that had been buried for nearly 10 years. This wasn't just about a house. This was about reclaiming every piece of myself they'd eroded. But how did I, the reliable little sister, end up holding that piece of paper? Let me take you back. It started when I was 25, fresh out of California State University, Fresno, with a degree in interior design. My head was full of dreams about reviving the historic homes that dot the Central Valley. Our family's ranch, a Spanish-style house built by my grandparents in the 1950s, felt like my natural first canvas. It was more than a house. It was a symbol set among an aging almond orchard that my grandmother, Beatrice Klein, had nurtured for most of her life. I can still picture her hands, tough and leathery from decades of pruning under the valley's brutal sun. Grandma Beatrice was the only one who really saw me. She saw the quiet girl sketching floor plans while my older sister, Cassidy, performed for applause. She saw something deeper. So that summer, when the valley heat worsened her health, I moved back home to care for her. While my parents were off in Los Angeles, playing cheerleader at Cassidy's latest marketing conference, I was driving Beatrice to doctor's appointments in Fresno. Those drives were our sanctuary. She'd tell stories about the land, her voice frail but iron strong. "Those almond trees remember everything, Caitlin," she'd say, her gnarled fingers tracing the lines in my palm as if transferring a map. "You take care of them and they'll outlive us all." I clung to those words, learning to care for the thirsty trees as rising water taxes squeezed the life out of small farms like ours. Cassidy, 3 years my senior, was the undisputed golden child. Her visits were rare events, always accompanied by grand excuses. She was launching her first fashion boutique in Sacramento. One afternoon, with Beatrice dozing in her chair nearby, Cassidy turned her dazzling smile on me. "Caitlin, I need a tiny loan. Just $2,000 for some startup costs. This store is going to be epic." Her eyes had that glint of invincibility our mother worshipped. I hesitated, my own dreams felt so new and fragile, but I wired the money from my meager savings. Later, when Cassidy bragged about it, Mom beamed. "Your sister is going to make it," she declared, her tone dismissing my own restoration projects as a quaint little hobby. That night, I opened an Excel spreadsheet on my laptop. My first entry, loan to Cassidy, $2,000. Unpaid. Emotional pressure from Mom. It felt petty then, a secret ledger of my own resentment. But the calls kept coming. A few thousand for inventory. Another few for a can't-miss opportunity. Whenever I timidly asked about repayment, she'd laugh it off. "You're our reliable little sister," she'd chirp, as if that were my sole purpose. And all the while, the ranch itself was becoming a third, demanding sibling. The roof leaked. The antique irrigation system creaked and failed under punishing water fees. I spent $300 of my own entry-level salary each month just to keep the basics running, patching things with my own hands because Dad would just shrug and say, "It's old. What can you do?" Mom, Marilyn, would scroll through photos of Cassidy's boutique on her phone, sighing with admiration. "Cassidy is so brave," she'd say, while my sketches for a local museum renovation gathered dust on the table. Why is it always her? The question became a bitter mantra in my head, punctuated by the blink of my spreadsheet's cursor as I logged another $5,000 for emergency roof repairs. One evening, Beatrice found me at the kitchen table, bathed in the blue light of the laptop screen. She placed a weathered almond shell in front of me. "Keep those records to yourself, child," she whispered, her voice barely a rustle. "Roots without proof wither in a drought." I didn't understand the full weight of her warning then. I had no idea that this digital ledger of wrongs was quietly putting down roots of its own, soon to erupt and reclaim everything. 7 years slipped by, measured in unpaid loans and patched-up leaks. Then, on an ordinary afternoon in 2023, a discovery in a dusty garage rewired my entire world. I was 32, buried in a freelance project redesigning an old barn for a museum near Fresno. The Central Valley sun pressed down, turning the air into a hazy oven as I hauled boxes from the ranch garage to make room for fabric samples. Our Spanish-style house, with its clay tile roof and graceful arches, had always been my steadfast anchor. But that day, even it seemed to wilt. Out back, the almond orchard looked desperately thirsty, its leaves curling inward like fists against a new state water tax. Sweat stung my eyes as I shifted a stack of my grandmother's old irrigation manuals. That's when it fell, a yellowed envelope, dislodged from its hiding place between crumbling binders. Neat, familiar handwriting graced the front, Beatrice Klein's legacy. My hands trembled. Kneeling on the cool concrete, dust motes swirling in a slant of light, I tore the envelope open. Inside was a property deed for the ranch, dated 2016, a full year before Beatrice's passing. My eyes scanned the lines once, twice, not believing. It listed me, Caitlin Reed, as the sole owner. A notarized transfer from her to me. A separate page outlined that my parents, Marilyn and Joe, could remain as tenants at will, nothing more. Beneath it lay a letter from her longtime attorney, Victor Lang. "Caitlin," it began. "This land is your roots now. Preserve the almond orchard. Don't let Silicon Valley developers turn it into another tech parking lot. I know you'll keep its true meaning. Generations are in this soil." I slumped against a rusty tool chest, the paper crinkling in my grip. I read it 3 times. The garage smells of damp earth, old motor oil, and the ghostly sweetness of long-decayed almond hulls swirled around me. Why me? The question echoed. Beatrice saw a keeper in me, someone who valued what lasted, while Cassidy chased the next shiny thing. But this meant the ranch, our family home, had been legally mine for 7 years. 7 years of my parents acting like undisputed landlords. 7 years of Cassidy casually mentioning how much a developer might pay for the land. A sickening twist coiled in my gut. They had watched me pour my savings into repairs and taxes, all while quietly planning their own exit. That night, with the envelope locked in my desk, I dove into the cold logic of California property law. The blue light of my laptop lit the dim kitchen. Adverse possession. Quiet title. Statute of limitations. The key fact glowed on the screen. The deadline to contest a property transfer is 4 years. It had expired in 2020. The title was not just mine, it was uncontestable. I emailed a scan to Victor Lang. His reply arrived by morning, terse and definitive. "Caitlin, Marilyn and Joe are merely tenants. They have no ownership claim. I advise caution until you're ready." Caution felt like a shard of glass in my throat. But a week later, I needed to know. Over a tense family dinner, with a rare breeze whispering through the parched orchard, I dropped a test. The water bill was $4,000 this quarter. "The ranch can't sustain this much longer." Marilyn's fork halted midair. "Well, of course it can," she said, her voice slick with certainty. "It's our home." Joe just grunted in agreement, eyes fixed on his plate. Unseen in my pocket, my phone's recorder was running, its red light a secret vigilante. Their lie hung between us, thick as the valley fog. The very next day, Cassidy's call came. Her voice was all bright, brittle desperation. "Sis, the boutique's in a post-divorce tailspin. Loan me $10,000? Larry's being a deadbeat with child support." For the first time in my life, I said it. No, the word felt foreign and powerful on my tongue. "Sorry, Cass. Every penny I have is going into the ranch. She scoffed, a sharp, dismissive sound. Fine. Have it your way. The line went dead. I opened my spreadsheet and made a new entry, loan denied. First boundary established. But the victory felt thin. Their deception about the house burned hotter than the summer asphalt outside. They had conspired in silence, letting me fund a future they planned to sell out from under me. The hurt was there, a deep, old ache, but it was suddenly dwarfed by a cold, clarifying rage. I was done playing their game. The deed in my drawer was no longer just a piece of paper. It was a weapon, loaded and in my hands. The discovery in the garage didn't just give me a deed, it gave me a purpose. Over the next 2 years, from late 2023 through 2025, a meticulous plan took root, growing in secret alongside the parched almond trees. While I continued my freelance work, designing spaces that married historical charm with drought-defiant irrigation for struggling Fresno co-ops, I began a different kind of project. I watched as Silicon Valley developers, like carrion birds, descended on the Central Valley, snapping up land for data centers and corporate housing. Their greed wasn't just a threat, it was the perfect catalyst. One fall afternoon, during a phone call where Cassidy was lamenting her boutique's latest post-divorce struggles, I casually planted the seed. You know, I keep hearing these tech companies are throwing insane money at any land with a water meter. Our orchard, with these tax hikes pushing out the little guys, could be a goldmine. The silence on the other end was profound, then broken by a sharp, interested laugh. You know, that's not a bad idea, she said. Larry's been saying the store needs a serious cash infusion. Larry Vance. Her new husband, a business consultant, who had appeared with suspicious speed after her divorce. I'd heard him on their visits, pacing the ranch porch, muttering into his phone about bridge loans and quick equity flips. The hook was set. Soon, Cassidy began her soft probe. This place just sits here, a money pit, she'd say to our parents over coffee, her tone light, but her eyes calculating. Why not cash out? Joe would grumble about the roof, the pipes. Marilyn would offer a vague, agreeing hum, her gaze skittering away from mine. I said nothing. I simply pressed record on my phone, archiving each hushed conspiracy, each time-stamped betrayal. I knew I needed backup. In early 2024, I reached out to Brooke Ellis, my former Fresno State roommate who had traded corporate law for a fierce practice in real estate law. Over coffee, I spread the documents before her. Her eyes, sharp and legal-trained, widened. "This is ironclad, Kate," she breathed. We hatched our strategy on cafe napkins. Brooke would be my remote witness, ready on a video call. The trigger would be Cassidy's inevitable push to sell. My line was simple. Did you run this by me? After all, it's Mom and Dad's house, right? It was designed to provoke a reaction, a slip of the mask, a moment of pure, unvarnished truth. Then you bring down the hammer, Brooke said. Stay calm. Let them dig the hole, then show them the deed. I fortified my position with forensic detail. Every receipt for ranch repairs, from the $2,000 in parts for a burst irrigation line I fixed myself to the cumulative $35,000 I'd poured into the property since Beatrice's death, was photographed, scanned and logged. My spreadsheet transformed from a secret ledger of grief into a damning financial timeline. When Cassidy called that spring, her voice tight with faux crisis over a stuck custom shipment, I was ready. A guilt-tripping text from Marilyn preceded it. Your sister is trying so hard. This time, my refusal was cold, clean, and final. Can't do it, Cass. The ranch bills are piling up. The dead air on the line was its own confession. I saved the exchange in a folder labeled escalation. Each piece of evidence now felt like a bullet, carefully loaded into a chamber. Outside my window, the almond trees stood enduring and heavy with fruit, a quiet testament to what I was fighting for. Inside, during family visits, Marilyn would still gush to Joe about Cassidy's resilience, utterly blind to the fault lines widening beneath us. I no longer felt like a participant in their drama. I had become the director, patiently waiting for the curtains to rise on the final act. The trap was built. All that was left was for them to walk into it. Thanksgiving arrived, a stage dressed in autumnal colors and laden with food. The air in the Spanish ranch house was thick with the aroma of roasting turkey and almond stuffing, a scent that now felt like a prop in a play. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands were steady. The phone in my apron pocket was live, a silent witness. The deed rested in my bag, a patient secret by my chair. Cassidy, Larry, and their kids, Aaron and Riley, swept in with their usual entitled lateness. The children clutched the latest tablets, shiny trophies of leveraged ambition. My parents descended into their familiar fawning ritual, cooing over the kids, completely blind to the hand-stitched napkins at their places, my small, silent tribute to Beatrice and the land she loved. We took our seats around the heavy oak table. The moment had come. I served myself some stuffing, my tone deliberately casual. You know, with the way Silicon Valley is gobbling up valley land for those data centers, this ranch must be worth an absolute fortune now. Cassidy's eyes immediately flickered to Larry. A smug, knowing smirk spread across his face as he adjusted a cufflink. Exactly, Cassidy said, leaning forward, her voice dripping with conspiratorial glee. That's why we're selling. Mom and Dad are finally on board. It's time to cash out this lot for their retirement. I kept my expression neutral, a placid lake. Did you run this by me, Cass? I asked, tilting my head slightly. After all, it's Mom and Dad's house. Her mask slipped instantly, twisting into a vicious sneer. Why would I? You're just the help, Caitlin. The words still hung in the air when her hand shot out. The crack of her palm against my cheek was a sharp, violent punctuation to the sentiment. My skin burned. 10 minutes, she snarled, her voice venomous. Pack your stuff and get out of my house. From behind her, the soundtrack played, Marilyn's gleeful clapping and a tittering, "It's about time, Cassidy." Joe's raspy chuckle, like sandpaper on old wood. I let the sting settle, then I smiled. A slow, deliberate unfurling of lips that didn't touch my eyes. I see, I said, my voice calm. I reached for my bag. The room's collective breath hitched as I withdrew the simple manila folder and let it fall onto the table with a definitive thud. Then you have 5 minutes, I stated, the words clear and cold. This ranch belongs to me. The reaction was a beautiful, terrible tableau of shock. Cassidy's fork clattered onto her plate. All color drained from her face. Erin's young eyes widened in confusion. Riley clutched her tablet like a life raft. Larry sputtered, incoherent. What is this? He finally managed. In one fluid motion, I tapped my phone screen, ensuring the recording continued, and initiated the video call to Brooke Ellis. Her professional, composed face filled the display. Brooke Ellis, attorney at law, she stated for the record. The property known as the Klein Ranch belongs solely to Caitlin Reed. The title was bequeathed via a notarized deed in 2016 by Beatrice Klein. The statutory period to contest has expired. It is uncontestable under California law. I have certified copies, and please be advised this conversation is being recorded. I swiped the screen and played the crystal-clear audio file. My mother's voice, from 2 years prior, filled the stunned silence. Well, of course it can. It's our home. Chaos erupted. Cassidy lunged for the folder, shrieking, "This is a fake. You're scamming us." Larry, his face now a florid red, blustered about lawsuits. I merely leaned back, the picture of unnerving calm. "You took a $20,000 deposit from a developer for a property you don't own," I said, looking directly at Larry. "That's fraud. Good luck with that." Aaron began to cry. "Aunt Caitlin, why are you fighting?" Riley tugged desperately at Cassidy's sleeve, but her mother was a statue of rage. Cassidy's final glare promised hellfire. She seized Larry's arm, yanked her weeping children, and stormed out. The front door slammed with such force the dining room chandelier shivered, crystals tinkling a faint, discordant tune. Then silence. Deep, consuming silence. The magnificent, untouched turkey sat cooling in the center of the table, its steam fading. My parents stared, frozen, at their empty plates. All their laughter had vanished, leaving a hollow void. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, the tiny red recording light still glowing. The table before us was a battlefield littered with the wreckage of their lie. The meal was over, but the war for my life had only just begun. The slamming door echoed into a hollow quiet. I turned from it to face my parents. The grand turkey, now just a cold carcass on its platter, seemed like a grotesque centerpiece for this final scene. I slid my phone across the polished oak toward them. "Play it," I said, my voice low and flat. I tapped the screen. The room filled with my mother's voice from 2 years prior, thin and unmistakable. "Well, of course it can. It's our home." The audio ended, leaving only the low, indifferent hum of the kitchen refrigerator. Joe's fork, loaded with a bite he would never taste, froze in midair. His knuckles were bone-white against the silver. Marilyn's eyes were wild, darting from me to the front door, as if she could still see the ghost of Cassidy's exit, the children's confused whimpers still haunting the hallway. "When did you find out, Mom?" I asked. My tone was conversational, as if asking about the weather. "Victor Lang called right after Beatrice's funeral in 2016, didn't he?" She flinched as if struck, her hands crushing a linen napkin in her lap. "Caitlin, please." Joe's palm came down on the table with a force that made the water glasses jump and chime. "This is family business," he roared, his face purpling, veins cording at his temples. "Secrets are what hold a family together." I didn't move. "Secrets like letting me believe the ranch was yours so I'd keep financing your lives?" I opened my laptop. The cold blue light illuminated their stunned faces and the faded plaster walls. On the screen, my spreadsheet glowed, a meticulous ledger of betrayal. $35,000 in repairs since Beatrice died. That was me buying new irrigation pipes when the water tax hit $400 a month. $15,000 in loans to Cassidy that evaporated into her boutique. Marilyn's breath caught in a wet hitch, tears spilling over. "We never asked you to." "No," I agreed, my voice cutting. "You just sighed and pointed at every cracked tile, every leaking faucet. You let me break my back and drain my account, thinking I was saving your home." Joe leaned forward, his voice dropping to a gravelly, desperate growl. "You're twisting it all. Cassidy's divorce shattered her. $50,000 in debt after that parasite Larry's schemes. She needed that sale. She was drowning." I gave a slow, acknowledging nod. Then I played the next file. The speaker emitted a crisp, clear recording from their last visit. Cassidy's voice, hushed but eager. "The transfers are set. $20,000 from the developer." Then Larry's voice, muffled but distinct, followed by a snicker. "If Mom and Dad sign fast, Silicon Valley won't even notice a little consultant's fee bump." The clip ended with Cassidy's complicit giggle. A raw, guttural sob broke from my mother. She buried her face in her hands. She was desperate, Caitlin. After the divorce, the custody mess. We thought the money would make it right. Joe reached a trembling hand toward her, but his eyes remained locked on me, hard and glittering with hate. "You're destroying your family over a piece of paper." "Destroying," I repeated. The word felt clean in my mouth. "You hid my inheritance for 9 years. You let me shoulder every burden while you plotted to sell my grandmother's legacy, her orchard, her soil, to a tech baron. You weren't trying to save Cassidy. You were willing to steal from me to do it." The only sound was my mother's ragged weeping, filling the space where their lies used to live. I closed the laptop. The final click was the sound of a gate locking shut. "The formal eviction notice will be served tomorrow morning," I stated. "California law gives you 3 days. After that, your tenancy here is terminated." Joe's jaw worked, a muscle twitching under his stubbled skin. "You'd evict your own parents," Marilyn whispered, looking up with shattered eyes. We can talk about this." But I was already on my feet, gathering the untouched plates. The crushing weight that had sat on my chest for a decade, the weight of their expectations, their disregard, their lies, began, for the first time, to loosen its grip. Their tears fell onto the tablecloth, staining the fabric. This wasn't my tragedy. It was theirs. And the reckoning was just getting started. 6 months after the Thanksgiving that split my world in two, the legal machinery ground to its final conclusion. In March 2026, the Fresno County Superior Court formalized the eviction, a 45-day procedural marathon that ended with a simple ruling: clear title, uncontestable. The law was a blunt instrument, and it had swung in my favor. I stood on the ranch driveway that cool spring morning, a new set of keys cold in my palm, and watched a locksmith methodically change the locks on my front door. Behind me, the almond orchard was a cloud of defiant pink and white bloom against the washed-out Blue Valley sky. My parents, Marilyn and Joe, were a silent, grim tableau of defeat. They loaded the last of their boxes into a battered SUV, their faces hollowed by stress and the relentless parade of court notices. There were no parting words, no attempts at reconciliation, just the muffled sound of my mother's weeping from the passenger seat before my father gunned the engine too hard, spitting gravel as they turned toward the highway. Their destination was a modest senior apartment in Clovis, a $2,800 a month reality paid for by the last dregs of their savings, now emptied by feudal legal fees. Cassidy's collapse was swifter and more spectacular. The $20,000 deposit from the developer became the cornerstone of a fraud complaint I filed against Larry. Bank subpoenas, orchestrated by Brooke, laid bare his shell game finances. The IRS, with its own particular appetite, descended. An audit uncovered a nest of tax evasion and tens of thousands in hidden income from a trail of shady real estate deals. By January, the boutique was a memory, liquidated in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy fire sale that consumed their suburban home. Her rage text, "This is your fault. We're homeless," was the last communication I received before I blocked her number. The echo of all her previous, unanswered demands was its own kind of poetic justice. The subsequent divorce was a dust storm of its own. Larry's offshore shelters crumbled in family court. Cassidy was granted custody of Aaron and Riley, but was denied a single cent of spousal support, the judge's opinion scorched by the evidence of fraud. She floundered, and the children's lives became a stressful shuffle between a cramped apartment and court-monitored visits. I sometimes saw their confusion referenced in the dry language of public custody evaluations, a faint, sad footnote about a lost ranch and an aunt who was no longer there. My own pursuit of justice extended beyond the property line. Armed with the meticulous, years-long evidence of my spreadsheet, I sued my parents for unjust enrichment in small claims court. The case was a simple, powerful narrative: $40,000 invested in a property based on a deliberate lie. The judge awarded me $28,000. A clear breach of implied contract, he stated, the gavels crack a sound that would have made Beatrice nod in solemn approval. The story, of course, refused to be contained by court documents. It seeped into the lifeblood of the valley. An anonymous online post I shared, detailing the inheritance betrayal, ignited a firestorm. It resonated with a deep, local fear of being displaced by Silicon Valley's thirst for land. The Fresno Bee ran a front-page feature: "Betrayal in Almond Orchard Fuels Silicon Valley Land Grab Fears." They quoted a local designer reclaiming her legacy. I gave no interviews, letting the facts and the public outrage do their work, watching as the last of Cassidy's carefully curated social reputation disintegrated. With the ranch's title clear and my spirit clearer, I began to build. I launched the Erosion Design Co-op that spring, a venture that wove together guided tours of the heritage almond orchard with workshops on sustainable, place-based interior design. It was Beatrice's legacy reimagined. In its first year, it thrived, netting $70,000, capital that immediately cycled back into the land as a state-of-the-art solar drip irrigation system and wages for seasonal harvest hands. My personal life, once a barren field of obligation, began to green as well. I met a landscape architect from Modesto who understood roots, both in soil and in principle. Our weekends were now filled with quiet projects and easy laughter, never once interrupted by a crisis call. A final message from Cassidy slipped through a month ago, a plea, this time, for money to fund Riley's therapy. My finger hovered for only a second before I deleted it unread. I finally understood the lesson the Valley had been trying to teach me: boundaries are not an act of vengeance. They're the essential, non-negotiable work of survival. In an ecosystem under constant siege, from drought, from greed, from those who would sell its very soul, The only way to preserve something real is to protect its roots without apology. I had reclaimed mine. There would be no second chances for those who had tried to rip them from the ground.